we're going to profile another early career journalist named Morgan Scott, who works under the direction and management of Sean Carroll in Syracuse. She's been at the station since Labor Day. So she's been there for 9 months, early career journalist, and they've been teaching her the ropes on that big triangle: questioning government leaders, accountability, relentless follow-up, voice of the voiceless, following the money.
Yeah.
And
I mean, hopefully I don't call you.
Yeah, everybody
Okay,
mute your
thank
phones.
you.
got open, we got commentary, not just in the chat.
Commentary. Yeah, someone's taking a phone call. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
We don't want to hear your call because we don't want to all hear all the bad stuff that might happen. Next slide. So here's what Morgan did. Morgan was covering a very basic story. A school superintendent in Syracuse decided to move high school kids from starting at 7:50 back to 7:25 in the morning because he had a busing problem with his buses. Okay, it's a scheduling thing. A lot of parents didn't like it, and they felt like they were cut out, and they were just informed, hey, we're starting school a half an hour earlier next year for your teenagers. Not easy for parents, not easy for scheduling, not easy for kids to get up that early in the morning, and some concerns, but the superintendent just did it. They just blanketly did it. So Morgan did a story in mid-May, which I circled in the upper left, and then she did a follow-up, and she started asking questions and asking more questions and asking more questions in their crisis in the classroom. And she, got what we typically get, the stiff arm. So we go to the next slide and we see that she started, first in with parents, the voice of the voiceless. And we're going to watch how she goes through everything, almost everything in that triangle. Let's start with the voice of the voiceless.
It's very challenging as a parent. It's very challenging because of the schedules, work schedule, and the kids' schedule is very challenging.
It's already hard for them to get up for the 7:50, so 7:25, it's going to make it even harder.
Current high school students say this will only make less students show up to school.
I mean, I feel like it's gonna deter them to even go, honestly, because even now I know kids who can't get up at 7:50, get there at 7:50.
I think overall it's not going to be effective.
They do what they want to do these days.
They do what they want to do these days. On the next slide, that was the quote from Tiffany Johnson, a mom, talking about the local school system. She threw her hands up. They do what they want to do these days. That's the thought process about local government from a lot of the constituents. That's oftentimes a one and done. They won't talk to us. We have the parents. We move on to the next story. But that's not what Syracuse did, because they have a relentless follow-up mentality. And so even on a story like this about moving start times, they went down the road. It's not the biggest story of the year. It's not the biggest story Sean's newsroom has covered. But it was a great opportunity for an early career journalist to start to dig, to try to get answers for these parents. So you go to the next slide and you see how it wasn't just her. You got the anchors involved too. You get everybody involved, asking the questions, helping marshal her through this process. Leaders not answering your questions. Let's go ahead and play this next little clip of a mashup of her reporting over a few days.
CBS 5's Morgan Scott continues her push for answers.
School leaders are refusing to discuss why this solution was arrived at. Parents and teachers continue to contact us with their concerns over the decision. Nearly 2 weeks after the decision was announced, still no public discussion on a decision that impacts thousands of families. But we're not done without inquiries quite yet. It's now been 2 days since the superintendent's communications team said they'll get back to me with his availability. In an email response to 15 questions, we have identified at least 5 unanswered questions we plan to ask the superintendent. We will continue to update you when we get these answers.
I just love seeing this. This is a journalist who's 9 months out of her college graduation at Syracuse, and she's been on this team now since Labor Day, and they are guiding her through this process and helping her develop into a process-driven, relentless reporter, asking questions. On the next slide, again, I want you just to watch this next slide and think about, look at how they headed this. This was their full screen. Leaders not answering your questions. Leaders not answering your questions. That's everything in that triangle on the left. Questioning government leaders, holding them accountable, being relentless. Who's your questions? You, the voiceless people. I mean, they've encapsulated it all there, and then they name names. Let's go ahead and roll this.
And here's who is refusing to discuss whether any of the concerns we continue to hear from parents, students, and teachers are being heard. School Superintendent Anthony Davis and the entire Syracuse City School Board is refusing to answer questions. Syracuse Mayor Ben Walsh and his communications team specifically avoided our questions today.
The mayor avoided our questions, and who's she asking them on behalf of? She said parents, students, and teachers. That was May 24th. What do you think happened on May 25? Let's go to the next slide. The elected mayor, of course, he came out and spoke. They found Mayor Ben Walsh, and he spoke, and he gave an answer, and he basically said, look, it's not an ideal change, but I still back the superintendent. Fair enough. No controversy here, but they got him to talk. And then the next slide, you see that social media starts to play in. People start asking questions because we're asking questions. And you think that superintendent doesn't read posts like this from Corey Lester? He sure does get paid a lot of money to sit there and not answer questions. So that pressure begins to mount, right? And you can see that eventually, we may have a breakthrough. If you go to the next slide, you'll see where we go from here. We go to this relentless headlining. Look at the green things I've underlined and how spot on this is with what we're trying to do. Questions unanswered down the bottom left. Unanswered questions below that. Up on the right, the superintendent refuses to answer questions. 12, 13, 14 days of this, what do you think happens? Bottom right, yes, he finally discusses it. Let's go to the next slide and take a look at that. She did all this relentless follow-up work. Given that latitude, given that push, given that direction from the newsroom managers, and on the right side of the next slide, you see it, whammo, there it is, June 2nd. The superintendent sits down. This is not a Watergate sit down. You're not sitting down with Nixon at the height of the Watergate. What you have here is a government official who did not want to talk and was prodded by a news organization to talk and to start answering some questions. So let's look at the interchange. We'll go to the next slide here. And before we roll this, and it's just a cut down version of Morgan's reporting, but I want you to notice how she does a couple of things. She asks questions on behalf of the voiceless, and she asks rather direct questions. And what you're going to hear from the superintendent is pretty confident answers. She's pretty confident, but it's very, very revealing when you watch this. Let's go ahead and roll.
Superintendent of the Syracuse City Schools is finally answering our questions.
Here she comes after weeks of reporting.
After dozens of emails sent out to his communications team, now Superintendent Anthony Davis says he wants to send a clear message to families in the district.
So here's her first question. Were parents or others consulted?
Was there at any point a time where you reached out to community members or maybe perhaps another school district that has implemented those changes already for some sort of advice to the busing issue that you guys are experiencing?
Not necessarily. I've been a part of other districts that I've been a part of, whether we change times or not change times, but it wasn't based on busing because they had their own busing systems.
Yeah, he said not necessarily. That means no, I didn't reach out. So then she says, hey, what about the sleep loss that people are concerned about with their teens?
One of the overarching concerns with the start times that we've gotten from our viewers and parents that tune in and send us emails is obviously the medical science and the CDC guidance and recommendation that says that these teens specifically, the high schoolers and the middle schoolers specifically, need those 8 to 10 hours of sleep. Was that ever considered when making the decision for this change in the start times?
Sure. Here's a question. The question I would have is, do we really believe that our teens are going to get more sleep because they start later? Because I've been in education 38 years and I've been around teens the whole time, and I don't believe they're going to go to sleep earlier. I don't believe they're going to get more sleep because our teens, that's not their DNA.
So he has an opinion based on his 38 years in education that he thinks that, you can start school as early as you want. The kids aren't going to go to bed earlier. That's his anecdotal. You may agree with him or you may disagree, but now we have finally been able to hear him. If you go to the next slide, this is the key component of what we're always trying to drive towards. We're not trying to get lawmakers on TV so that there's not a gotcha moment. We want the viewer to be able to, in the upper left, learn things about the leader's thinking by hearing the leader answer direct accountability questions in real time. And that's what he did. He didn't shy away from it. He said, yeah, I made the decision. And in other parts of the interview, he said, it was my decision. And he feels very, very confident in it. And so for whatever that is, and you can interpret his his level of confidence positively or negatively, but at least the viewer has a chance now to understand that. And if you go to the next slide, I kind of put a little, thing up there at the top right that says, look, relentless results. Relentlessness gets results. One and done never gets a one-on-one. All right. If you try to think about this, if you want a one-on-one with a lawmaker or a public official who's at the center of a controversy, big or small, you're going to have to be relentless in your follow-ups and you're going to have to push. And this 9-month journalist pushed and she got the interview. And if you go to the next slide, we'll see again, if you take it back to the triangle, there she is in the upper left, doing the accountability reporting, asking those questions. He's the government official we're trying to get the answers from. How did she do it? Bottom left in that triangle there. Relentless following up. And who was she asking questions? Everywhere along the way, every report she did, she was asking on the behalf of parents, teachers, and students. The relentless following up, the voice of the voiceless, we talk about it very often. Okay, on the final slide here, I would just say, Tristan, as we wrap up on the very bottom, one and done never gets it done. If you're going to be a really significant player of impact in your marketplace, if you're going to be relevant, the one and done mentality is not going to get it done. And so that really is where the discipline comes in, Scott, to not get chased away by the shiny object of the day, but to say, maybe we can't put Morgan on this story 5 days in a row, but we can keep peeling back the layers over a couple of weeks and we're going to get that interview.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you think about a loyal viewer. Again, a loyal viewer is watching you twice a week. And so that's why you have to be relentless in the follow-ups. And I think this was a great example. And Bill mentioned that interview, it wasn't a gotcha interview, but it was important that she was relentless in asking the unanswered questions. And